Today is Monday, November 8th, and this is William Michael of the Classical Liberal Arts Academy. Today I'd like to talk about a topic that many homeschool parents have to deal with, and it's the concern that's felt when we either choose to homeschool or have been homeschooling and realize that a child is 16 or 17 or even 18 years old and is now approaching the time when major life decisions need to be made. And we realize that the child has not been well prepared. And normally when we say the child has not been well prepared, we're talking specifically about academic issues. So we're looking at a 16 to 18-year-old child who has not studied sufficiently to fill out a high school transcript. And now we're facing a number of dilemmas, and we need to find a solution. It can be very stressful, not only to the parents, but also to the children. And when we first look at this problem, when we first look at this issue, what we see is a confused problem. And when I say confused, I mean it's composed of a number of different issues. We look at it as just this big ugly problem, but if we think through it, if we reason through it carefully, we'll find that it actually consists of a number of different parts, and it's also being complicated and made to appear worse by some false assumptions or ungrounded fears. And there's also an important opportunity here to eat some humble pie and realize that when it's time to submit our work before others for criticism or approval or admission, all of a sudden our self-congratulating exaggeration of what we do becomes apparent. And so it's a little embarrassing. And that's, I think, one of the main sources of the stress and concern. It's embarrassing. But as I said, the problem is complicated, and there's a number of different factors, and if we take the time to analyze this problem and break it into its parts, we'll see that it's almost never as bad as it appears, that both the parents and the students are bringing misunderstandings and unreasonable expectations to the table that all need to be dealt with. So let's talk through this situation. It's a situation that I've had to deal with myself with my older children, because we've just got to the point where we had so many things going on, we're doing so much, that when our kids start getting to the end of high school age and start looking at their options, they develop an interest in moving on and choosing some adult path of action. And there are objective requirements to pursue that path, and dealing with those objective requirements is something of a shock when, as a homeschool student, you've sort of done what you've wanted through the years. And that goes for parents as well. So let's take this all apart. The first warning that I'd like to give, and this is based on experience. As I said, I've been there before. I understand the issue, and it's just real life. It's not a problem. It's easy to overcome. You just have some work to do. But the first problem that I'd warn you about is is the problem that's caused by an arrogant over-evaluation of one's accomplishments. We all think that we're working harder than we are. We all think that we're facing obstacles that are greater than others. And then we get to a point in life where it's time to do something and nobody cares. Nobody wants to hear the sob story. Nobody's impressed that you got yourself up and dressed. Nobody's impressed that you did what was required of you. And they look for more. They look for work that was done above and beyond what was required, what was minimal. And most people don't have anything to offer that's beyond what was required as a minimum. When you start to put the college application together or the high school transcript, it becomes clear pretty quickly that you didn't do very much. There's not much to write about. And if you think back, you can think back and consider all of the time that was wasted, all of the resources that were wasted, all of the times you were told to study, told to work, told to stop fooling around, told to stop playing, told to stop doing other things, and you disobeyed, and now the results are what they are, and it's just a humbling life lesson. And now that you're considering wrapping up your studies with a high school transcript or a college application, you find that you don't have very much to write about. It's a good time in life to realize the danger of arrogance, of thinking more highly of yourself than you should. And people don't like to hear that. People don't like the way that feels. But one of the differences between childhood and adulthood is that while you're a child, Scripture tells us that folly or foolishness is bound up in the heart of a child. And one of the reasons why foolishness is characteristic of children is because they live in an artificial fairyland where their father provides for their needs. Maybe even their mother shares in their fairyland a little bit if she's not practically minded. And the competition and objectivity of adult life and business is not known, is not experienced. And then all of a sudden, as we approach age 18, we find out that there are rules and regulations and requirements and standards for almost everything that we seek to do. Some adults choose to get their act together and start actually working. Other adults, Christians included, spend their whole lives complaining that they can't have what they want because of the requirements. And so it's a time to challenge yourself and ask, are you going to continue telling yourself that everything you do is good? Continue telling yourself that you don't have to listen to this person or that person or do this or do that. You can do what you want. Once you approach adulthood, you realize that that fairyland you've been living in is quickly coming to an end. And nobody's interested in paying for you to continue playing as an adult. And the good news is that that childish folly is just normal. We can think of saints who were sober and wise during their childhood, but you'll find that in 2,000 years of church history, you can probably only name 4 or 5 of them, because there aren't many. The problems of childhood are common, and the real question is whether the habits that have gotten you into this situation are abandoned or whether you continue in them. Because the good news, as I'm going to explain, is that if you choose to change, if you choose to get your act together, you can easily recover and be fine. But you've got to make that choice. And if you keep messing around, the problem that you feel and face when you're 17 or 18 is going to multiply rapidly as you get into your 20s. And so you'd better deal with it now and realize that you need to learn to become a working adult. Really, you should have become a working adult a few years back. And if you would have obeyed your parents, you likely would have been in a much better situation today than you are. If you would have obeyed God's commandments, you would be in a better situation today than you are. So it's a good opportunity to just face up to the truth, confess mistakes that you've made that you now understand, and amend your life. So you can approach it as an opportunity for positive change in your life, or you can just continue in it and let these problems snowball. And they are going to snowball and get worse. And as I said, they're going to get worse quickly. So the first thing that I advise you to do is commit yourself to breaking the bad habits that have gotten you into this situation in the first place. And what I recommend you do is sit down and make a few resolutions. Sit down at a time when you're thinking clearly, when you're thinking soberly about your life, about what you want to do in the future, about the obstacles that you face, and write a few resolutions, a few rules that you're going to commit to live by. And once you've written those resolutions, and you may want your parents to help you with this, once you've written those resolutions, those rules that will help you to fix the problem, you need to learn to stick to them as rules for your life. And you need to realize that if you don't stick to them, you may end up in worse circumstances. What I teach my children as they get ready for adulthood is that in adult life, there are windows of time, windows of opportunity for us to do certain things in life that are appropriate at different times of our lives. And if you ignore those windows of opportunity and waste years of your life doing other things that are not appropriate, that are not prudent, what will happen is that those windows will shut, and you may never have the chance at those opportunities again. And one of the reasons why is because there are younger kids coming up behind you, and those opportunities aren't going to wait for you to get your act together. A younger kid coming up who's ready is going to seize the opportunity that you left untaken. That's why you've got windows of opportunity, and you need to seize those opportunities or lose them. Now, the way you should think about your situation is that maybe from age 12 to 15 or 16 or even beyond, let's say your early teen years, let's say you made a bad use of that time and you can look back on it with regret. And you can say, I didn't use my early teen years wisely, and now I have to pay for it. That's the reality that you may have to acknowledge. But the good news is you have an opportunity now to use the next period of your life. Some of the people who used their early teen years well because they were under the direction of strict parents or a good school, or a combination of the two usually, they may have made good use of their early teenage years, but they may not be prepared for the challenges that are going to come in their later teenage years and early adulthood, because they've never had to learn to work on their own. And so many students who are impressive as 17-year-olds or 18-year-olds fall apart as 18 to 22-year-olds. And they don't continue in the line of progress that they started when they were younger, because they lose the support that was actually responsible for their achievements or apparent achievements. You have the opportunity to make up for the time that you lost and to make good use of the next years of your life. And if you make good use of them, by the time you're 20, 22, 25 years old, the trouble you had at this point will be a distant memory and will have very little effect at all on your life. And I can speak from experience on this, because this was my own story. When I was 18 years old, I was graduating high school. I was very smart. I was always gifted intellectually, but I didn't work in school. I didn't understand school, didn't pay attention. My parents really didn't care about school. I played sports. I cared about sports. But I was smart. But I didn't work. And so when I graduated from high school, my grade point average was a 2.3. I had a 2.3 grade point average at age 18. And when I applied to the school that I wanted to go to Rutgers University, I was denied because of my high school grade point average. And that was pretty embarrassing, because I was so smart. I was in honors classes. I was in classes with the best kids in the school. And they were being admitted to colleges all over the country. Duke University, the State University of New York, Rutgers University, Princeton University, on and on. Impressive, selective colleges and universities. And I, even though I was in their class, I was denied to the school that I wanted to attend. And so I had to start my college career at age 18 at a small local school because I couldn't get into the good school that I wanted to attend. My wife, on the other hand, we were together then. We had met when we were 17 years old. My wife was not nearly as gifted intellectually as I was. She wasn't even in the honors classes. She was in a level under my classes. But she was an A-B student who did what she was told. She had good grades. As I said, she wasn't as smart as I was. She wasn't in the highest classes as I was. But she worked hard and did what she was supposed to, and her parents were strict with school. And she graduated with a good grade point average. And even though she was beneath me, she was accepted into Rutgers University, and I was denied. And the reason why was because my wife made good use of her high school years, and I didn't. And I had to accept that reality, and it was embarrassing. My teachers knew it, my classmates knew it, and they were very comfortable telling me so. One of the girls I was friends with wrote in my high school yearbook, "You are the biggest waste of talent ever!" Exclamation point. And at that point in my life, that was true. But I wanted to change. I knew I had messed up. I knew that I fooled around. Most of my friends weren't in my honors classes. Most of my friends were friends from my sports teams. They weren't good students. And so the kids that I hung out with were never interested in school or studies. We hung out to play sports, to work out, not to study. And when I got to college, even though I had to attend a smaller local school, I went to a school in North Jersey called Montclair State University for 1 year. I was separated from my old friends and from my old activities, even from my family. And I was free to do what I wanted, and I wanted to fix my life. I didn't even know how to get good grades, but I started working hard in school, and I started getting B's in my classes, B+, B, an occasional A, sometimes a C, but I wasn't getting C's and D's anymore. And as I went on, my grades got better. And after my second semester, I had a 3.0 grade point average, which still wasn't very good. But I applied to transfer into Rutgers University and was accepted. And so after 1 year of getting my act together, I was accepted into the university that I wanted to attend, but was rejected by when I was 18 years old. By that time, I had really started to get my act together, and when I finished studies at Rutgers University, I graduated with honors. My grade point average was 3.8. I was inducted into 3 different honor societies, including the university's Phi Beta Kappa honor society, which is the most prestigious honor society that there is. And so by the time I reached my mid-20s, I went from a student who couldn't get in to Rutgers University to being one of the top students at the university. Because I used years 18 to 22 of my life wisely. And as I said, by the time that I finished my studies at Rutgers, my 2.3 grade point average class clown character was long gone, a distant memory. And even though I made bad use of my high school years, I made very good use of my college years. And I would say that I made very good use of my 20s, and I made very good use of my 30s and 40s. And I'm in a place now that's very good. But no one would have ever expected me to be where I am if they met me when I was 17 years old. And so you have the opportunity to commit, starting now, to no longer make the mistakes that you made when you were younger. Get your act together and do what's right. You need to grow up. You need to take life seriously and become an adult. And if you don't, windows of opportunity are going to close, and your situation's going to get worse over time. Now, this has nothing to do with salvation. God is merciful. God will always forgive your sins. If you're contrite, that is, if you're sorry for your sins, God will forgive your sins, and by God's mercy, you'll enjoy eternal life. But there are going to be temporal consequences in this life that you're going to have to deal with. And that's what you should be concerned about. This isn't a question of your salvation. There have been a number of well-known saints. I didn't say many because I don't want to exaggerate. There have been a number of saints who were known for being bad students. St. John Vianney, for example, struggled to get through his seminary studies. St. Bernadette was known to be a stupid girl in the sense that she was very poor in her academic work. That has nothing to do with their salvation. But these bad habits do have an effect on our life in this world. And those temporal consequences you should be very careful to avoid. And simply commit yourself at this point in your life to get on track and get your act together. So that's the first thing that I'd like to say. It's a time to sober up. It's a time to be humbled, maybe even embarrassed a little. But it's also a time to be challenged and to accept that challenge and make good use of it. Because if you do so, if you respond rightly to your situation, you can do great. But you've got to respond rightly. Now, if you choose not to respond rightly, obviously there's nothing that anyone can do to help you. But if you do want to change and you want to get your act together, get your academic work together and try to fix the problems, you can. So chill out. You can. And I'd like to explain to you what you should do. First of all, you need to ask yourself, what are my goals? What are my goals? And we're talking practical goals. Again, this doesn't have to do with salvation. The gospel and the sacramental life are separate. These are temporal concerns. Hopefully you don't allow these things to interfere with your spiritual life. They shouldn't, and they don't need to. Keep your spiritual life healthy and balanced, and keep your spiritual activities as the anchor of your life. Many young adults abandoned their spiritual life when they enter into young adulthood, and that just makes everything worse. For example, if you know that Sunday is the Lord's Day, and the commandment teaches very clearly that you are to keep Sunday holy, set apart as a day of rest and worship, if you don't do that, you're going to pay for it. That's a commandment. If you allow Sunday to become just another ordinary work day, you're going to regret it. Understanding that you have 6 days to labor and do all of your temporal work, and Sunday is a day for rest and worship. If you allow Sunday to become another day for secular work, your life is going to become unhappy very quickly. Keep Sunday holy. Keep your spiritual life healthy, because nothing else is more important. And if you have a healthy spiritual life, you'll be able to get through any problems that you face. But the minute your spiritual life falls apart, every area of your life will start to fall apart. The simplest thing to focus on are the sacraments. Go to Mass every Sunday and every holy day. Keep the precepts of the Church. Make your confession once a year, at least once a year. Receive communion. In other words, keep yourself in a state of grace so that you can receive communion. Keep your spiritual life healthy. I say that because I want to talk about temporal, practical things. And if your spiritual life is out of whack, everything is going to be out of whack. And what should you do practically? First of all, as I said, you have to set goals. And I'll give you some practical examples to help. My son Jonathan, when he was 18 years old, wanted to be a police officer. He knew that's what he wanted to do. He thought about seminary a little bit. We talked about it. He visited a seminary, but said, I really want to be a police officer. And so he spent some time with local police officers, and he said, this isn't what I want to do. I want to do more than this. This isn't it. And so then he learned about the military police, and he decided that he wanted to join the U.S. Army. And that became his goal. The reason why it's necessary to establish a goal is because your goal is going to have specific requirements. For example, for my son Jonathan, he wanted to enter the military, he wanted to join the reserves, and he wanted to be a military police officer. So he talked to the military recruiter, and he found out what was required for him to join the military and be able to be a military police officer. He had to have a high school diploma, and he had to score a certain score on a military test that's called the ASVAB, the ASVAB. So he had very specific requirements that he needed to focus on. He needed to have a high school diploma, and he needed to have a good score, the highest possible score, on his ASVAB test. So at that point in his life, because he was 18, we were able to work together and focus on those specific requirements that would allow him to fulfill his goal. So I gave him a plan of studies that would allow him to fill out his high school transcript and complete his modern diploma requirements. And I bought him a practice test book for the ASVAB test and had him work through that book to learn about the test, to learn all of the concepts that were going to be tested, and to take a number of practice tests. And so we spent about a year working on that. So even though Jonathan was 18, he just kept studying. He didn't say, oh, I'm 18 now, I have to leave. We took an extra year, and Jonathan got ready for his specific goal requirements. And when he was 19 years old, he took his ASVAB, scored very high on the ASVAB, finished his high school diploma requirements, and successfully achieved his goal of entering into the military and becoming a military police officer. Now, Jonathan struggled as a teenager for the same reason. He made bad use of his teenage years, decisions and behavior that he now regrets. And today, so 2 years later, Jonathan is 21 now. Though he made bad use of his high school years, Jonathan is a military police officer in the Army Reserves. He's in the ROTC program at the University of North Carolina in Charlotte. He's an AB student with his tuition paid and pay from the Army while he studies. So Jonathan, and this is what I want you to see, Jonathan was able to get his act together and recover in 2 years. And Jonathan went from a 17, 18-year-old student who had made bad use of his high school years to a 21-year-old student who is in excellent position in his life. 2 years it took him to get his act together, and no one will ever know about his foolish high school years, except us, of course. But what I want you to see is once he identified his goal, we were able to identify the specific requirements to achieve that goal and focus all of our attention on them. And it took an extra year to make those specific preparations. It took an extra year, so he didn't just leave home when he was 18. He knew that he had screwed up. He knew that he had wasted some time. And he decided to fix it, to spend a year working hard on his studies, focusing on a specific test that he needed a good score on, and he was able to succeed, achieve that goal, and 2 years later, all is well. The same can be done in your case. And that's what I'd like you to focus on. I don't know what your goals are, but one thing that you need to do is avoid just talking vaguely about things. You need to identify a specific goal. For example, with Jonathan, joining the military was a specific goal. For me, when I was 18, getting admitted to Rutgers University was a specific goal. In my case, I had to start at another college, get my grades up, and then apply as a transfer. That was how I was able to accomplish my goal, even though I had wasted my teenage years. You're going to need to figure out what your goal is, and it needs to be a specific goal, not some vague, lazy idea like, I want to be a doctor, or I want to be a whatever. You don't go from 18 years old to being a doctor. That's a goal, that's a long-term goal, but you need to make a short-term goal so that you can satisfy the requirements for that next step now. Now let's talk a simple goal like, I want to go to college. I'm 18 years old. I'm 17 years old. My high school transcript is very weak. I haven't studied well. If I were to try to put together a transcript, I don't even know what I would put on it because I really haven't done much of anything. What should I do? Step one, and we're assuming that your goal is you want to go to college. Step one is not choose a major, because you don't need to choose a major when you begin college. You don't need to choose a major to be admitted to a college. The first thing that you need to do is you need to choose a college that you want to graduate from. And the college you graduate from is what ultimately matters, because that's the college you receive your degree from, and your degree stays with you for your entire life. Just because you can't get admitted to that college when you're 18 doesn't mean that you can't graduate from that college. So don't let that discourage you. You need to, again, if you want to go to college, you need to identify the college that you want to graduate from. You need to go on that college's website, and I'd be happy to help you with this. You need to go on that college's website, go to their admissions page, and you need to read the admissions information and learn what is required for you to be admitted to that college. Freshman admission may be impossible for you. But learn what the requirements are, make a list of the requirements, and realize that's what you're going to need to do to get into that college or university. If it's something that you could do in another year or two, you may want to simply keep studying at home, because there's no reason you can't apply as a freshman when you're 19 or even 20 or 21 years old. No one cares. No one cares when you start college. No one cares when you finish college. Don't let those artificial concerns screw up your plans. No one cares. Figure out what's required for you to accomplish your goal, and then you're going to have to work to fulfill those requirements. Freshman admission to the college of your choice is one option, but there are other options. you can transfer into a college. You can start at a community college. You can start at a smaller local college that's easier to get into. That's what I did. You can start today, an option that I didn't have, you could start studying in an online program, an online college program, and you can get your college career started online from home and then use that to transfer into a better college, a permanent school. I have each one of my children do that. My children, when they're finished with their high school requirements, I have them start in an online college program. Nothing fancy. They have the option to use a local community college, but they don't like that. There's one online program, it's called Purdue University's online program, which was recommended to them by the military. And they like that very much. They enjoy the courses, they like the teachers, and they all have done well using that program. And then once they get a few courses completed with good grades, they apply and transfer into the school that they want to go to. My kids have wanted to attend University of North Carolina, that's here in Charlotte, North Carolina. And so they use an online program to prepare and get started and then transfer into the school that they want to go to. So there are a number of different ways to pursue your goal, and the requirements for each of those different ways are different. For example, to go to a community college, all that you need is a high school diploma or a GED, which I'm not going to talk about now. But the community college basically accepts anyone who wants to study. And what's good about a community college is it's usually affordable, and the credits that you earn at the community college will likely transfer into a better college when you apply to transfer. So you're not just wasting time and money. You can complete courses and have those credits transfer into another school. But you have to set your goal to know what school you want to go to in the end, to make sure that what you're studying at the community college will in fact transfer. For example, if you take a math class at a community college, that will transfer. But if you take a writing class at the community college, the college you want to apply to or transfer into may not accept your writing class because they have a specific way that they like to teach their students to write. And so you need to know the college you want to go to so that you can set your goals and know what the requirements are. You can go to a community college to get started. You can do online college studies to get started. And then there's usually a rule where you can transfer in once you've earned good grades and shown that you can handle college level studies. So just because you've made bad use of your high school years doesn't mean you can't end up at the best college, the college of your choice. It's a matter of what you're going to do with these next years. But you need to set a clear, specific goal, a specific college, a specific career if you don't want to go to college. So for example, my father was an electrician. He was an electrical contractor. He grew up when he was 18 years old. He went from high school into the electricians' union and began working as an apprentice because that's how it worked. One of my best friends in high school did the same thing. When we graduated high school, he didn't want to go to college. His father worked in construction, very successful, and he wanted to go into construction himself. And so he went and joined the electricians union and started at 18 years old as an apprentice. That's a different goal, different path. But you're going to have to set your goals for your adult life so that you can find out what's required, what is specifically required, because that's what you're going to need to focus on. Now, having said all that, for most of these options, the high school diploma is going to be required. Now, the high school diploma is not the ideal education that parents desire for their children. That's something completely separate. That's between parents and their children. The high school diploma is simply a document that's necessary to take certain steps in secular life. If you look at the high school diploma, you'll see that there are 5 subject areas for each of the 4 years: freshman, sophomore, junior, and senior. The 5 subject areas are English language arts, mathematics, science, foreign language, and social studies. For your high school diploma, that is all that you need to focus on. Now, if you only have 1 or 2 years to work with and you'd like to finish this high school diploma up, you don't have time to submit yourself to a complete course of study with all kinds of requirements that assume you have 4 or 5 years to study. Many of the things that students are asked to do are not necessary, but are simply given to students because it's assumed that they have a lot of time. When you don't have that time, you need to know what activities can be avoided, what studies can be skipped and ignored, and what's really necessary. For college admission, you're going to need to take a standardized test like the SAT. And this is very important. If you score well on the SAT, no one will question the quality of your high school education. It's very important for you to understand this. If you score well on the SAT, no one will question the quality of your high school education. And your SAT score, if it's good, will help you to get admitted into a college, even if your transcript isn't perfect. So my first piece of advice is that if college is in your plans, prepare for the SAT test and work to get a good score on the SAT, because that will be your first line of defense, a good SAT score. And that's not difficult to achieve. You need SAT prep help, and by learning the techniques that are necessary to take the SAT and do well, you can earn a good SAT score. And that needs to be a focus because that will assist your transcript. As for your transcript, you don't have time to waste. That's the bad news. The good news is that high school programs, high school students really don't do that much study. Think about it. They only have class 180 days a year. They only have class half of the year. And when they meet for class, they only meet for 40 minutes or so. So all that they have is 40 minutes for half the days of the year. And why that's important is if you work hard for 1 or 2 years, you can get all of that work done. If you work hard for 1 or 2 years, you can get all of that work done. And here's what I recommend you do. And you can do all of this in the Classical Liberal Arts Academy, and I'll explain. What I recommend you do is not worry about studying for mastery of every lesson of every subject, because that may not be possible. What you need to do is simply get the textbooks that I recommend for each high school level course. There's an article on the Academy website titled How to Earn a High School Diploma. I think there's a link to it in the left menu of the website. How to Earn a High School Diploma. And what you need to do is open that article up and look at the courses that are listed. And focus on those 5 subject areas that I mentioned, because those are the most important. See the textbook that I use for those online courses. You may not be able to complete the online courses, and that doesn't matter, because you're a homeschool student. You don't have to do everything that my courses require. Just do what I tell you here. Get the textbooks that are used for each of those courses. I don't mean you need to buy the books or have printouts of the books. I just mean get access to those sources for each course, each subject, and simply read through the book and take notes. Read through the book and take notes on every chapter. And have for yourself notes as proof that you've studied those books. You can work through those books as fast as you want. Study them and take notes. And you will have proof that you studied those subjects. Your parents, as homeschool parents, can create your transcript and they can assign you grades based on the work that you get done. And your parents can assign you whatever grades they want. I know this may shock some people, but if your parents want to give you straight A's in high school, they can. And there's nothing that anyone can say about it, because your parents are the homeschool administrators. Your parents can give you grades based on how you work. And my advice to the parents is tell your children, if you get through this book like Mr. Michael said, with notes for every chapter, I will give you an A for this course. If you get through half the book, I will give you a C for this course. Or you can set the rules whatever you want. You can say, there's 25 chapters. If you get the whole book finished with notes, you'll have an A. If you get through 20 chapters with notes, you'll have a B. 15 chapters is a C. 10 chapters is a D. Anything less than that, I'm not giving you a passing grade. And that's it. If you'd like me to help the student or to review their work, sign up for tutoring sessions and I'll do that. But that's all that you need to do. Study a quality textbook for each subject. Take notes to demonstrate that you did those studies. And your homeschool parents can give you grades based on their own assessment of your work. That's what homeschool is. Now, you can say, but if my parents just give me whatever grades they want, isn't that like cheating? No. A homeschool, first of all, is a real school. Every school determines for itself how it grades people's work. That's what every school does. When I was a private school teacher, I decided what was an A, what was a B, what was a C. I graded the papers. I made the tests. I graded the tests. I gave the grade. There was no absolute standard that I had to follow as a teacher. I made the lessons. I made the tests. I graded the assignments. I gave the grades. Your parents are the homeschool administrators. They have the same authority. They can make the rules. They can give the grades. Now, this is where your SAT score comes in. If your parents decide to give you straight A's, you can go and tell a college that you have a 4.0 GPA. And the college is going to look and say, okay, this kid has a 4.0, a perfect straight A grade point average in high school. And then they're going to look at your SAT scores. And if they see that you've got Bobo SAT scores, they're going to know that your homeschool transcript is a joke. But if they see that your homeschool transcript says that you did well and your SAT scores back that up because you've got good SAT scores, they're going to grant you the good grades because the SAT tests testifies that you studied well. Another piece of advice for parents is to use tutoring sessions with me so that I can get experience working with a student and I can provide a letter of reference when their studies are finished. What's important for a homeschool family, even though a homeschool is completely legal and the parents have authority to create their own school, create their own curriculum, assign their own grades, and so on, getting a letter of reference from a third party adds to the credibility of that high school transcript. I'm not going to lie for any family or student, but I am very happy to give a letter of reference to say that this student has worked hard, has sought to do well in his or her studies, and I believe that this student will be successful in college studies. I'm happy to do that for a student who shows me that he or she is willing to do so. And I recommend very strongly adding that to the child's high school package. So SAT score, diploma studies by studying the textbooks, taking notes, and proving that you've read and studied those textbooks, and having third-party testimony in the form of a letter of reference. Those three things can be accomplished in 1 to 2 years if the student is willing to get his or her act together and get into shape for college admission or whatever else. Now, if college admission is not the goal, like for my son when he was 18, college wasn't necessarily on his radar. He wanted to join the military and he really didn't have plans after that. And I thought that was fine because his training and experience in the military would present him with all sorts of options that he could then evaluate at the next step. But if a child has a goal that's not related to college, either a military goal or religious life or a mechanical trade or craft, the same recommendations apply. The high school curriculum needs to be completed, but it doesn't need to be completed in the slow, wasteful way that modern schools would complete it, where so much time is available. It can be completed quickly and simply by studying the textbooks and taking notes and having notes as proof of studies. Parents can set the rules for what grades will be given, and can assign those grades on a high school transcript. You don't need to worry about a high school transcript being discredited or anything like that. Homeschooling is normal today. Colleges and institutions like the military and others, they're used to it. I never have had a question about a high school transcript. And you need to not have any concerns about that. I can help you with that as well. If you want to pay for a consultation setting and have me prepare the transcript for you, I'd be happy to do that. It's not a big deal. It's normal today. But if there are other goals outside of college admission, entering into a craftsman's union, for example, you're going to have to find out what the requirements are for admission. Entering to a certain religious community, you have to find out what the requirements are for admission. Once you find out what those requirements are, you have specific targets to aim at over the next year or 2 years or whatever it takes, depending on how difficult they may be. And this is where real life starts to enter in, because you may have a goal that you will simply never qualify for. Or the qualifications will be so difficult that it may take you 10 years to get in. And you're going to have to evaluate whether you want to really pursue that. Because your fantasy land talk, like saying, I want to be a doctor, is cute when you're 14, because you like the idea of hanging out on a golf course and working 3 days a week. But when you learn that you can't even become a doctor until you've had 12 or more years of study, and that it costs hundreds of thousands of dollars to go to medical school, you're going to have to evaluate the reality of those goals. So to summarize here, that's more than an hour I've been talking. You have to begin by looking at where you're at and accepting the fact that time has been wasted. You have to accept and admit that you've made a bad use of your high school years. And you have to make a resolution to end that. Then you need to look ahead to your goals. Set a specific goal, the next step. And you need to find out what the requirements are for that first step. And then you need to use the next year or 2 years or whatever it takes to complete those requirements. If you do that, these years wasted will be in the rearview mirror. And as long as you stay on that right path and keep working, you'll never have to look back and never have to worry about them in the future. I can tell you this because I did it myself. I can tell you this because my own eldest son did this and is doing very well today. This is normal experience for millions and millions of teenagers. You're stepping into adult life. You're being forced to face reality, that your tantrums won't work, your opinion doesn't matter, and there are requirements that if you don't satisfy them, you have no chance, and no one cares what you think about that. Because there are 50 other people standing behind you ready to apply for the same spot, and no one cares what you think. That's what adult life is about. The market, the business world, the college world is a competitive, objective place. Sometimes not so objective. Sometimes there's favoritism or special opportunities given to special people. But that's out of your control. What's in your control is setting your goals, learning what's required, and then working to fulfill those requirements. If you don't do that, there's nothing else to talk about. But if you do commit to doing that, you have plenty of time. You have the rest of your life to achieve your goals. And what King David in the Psalms refers to as the sins of his youth will be forgiven, and you can make sure that they don't affect the rest of your life. You can look back on them and say, those were the sins of my youth, but I stopped those things when I became an adult. It's not too late. Your situation is not desperate. There's nothing to be anxious about. You simply have to get your act together and transition into adult life, and you can do that. I hope that this talk is helpful to giving you an idea for what you need to do. If you need more one-on-one help with doing this, whether you're a student listening to this or whether you're a parent listening to this on behalf of a student, I'm available. I can't offer one-on-one assistance for free because I have to pay for people to help me when I'm helping others. But if you need that help, my help is affordable. It's a simple live chat tutorial session is what I recommend. Live chat tutorial. We'll just chat back and forth. We can take care of any work that needs to be done. You don't need videos. You don't need in-person meetings or phone calls or all this stuff. Maybe sometimes here and there. But I charge $10 for a 1-hour live chat tutoring or consultation session. And you can use those as often as you want. You can't say that that's too expensive, especially when we can take care of these problems. And if the time comes and we need a video session, video meetings, one-on-one are $25 for an hour. And that includes whatever follow-up is necessary. My point is that help is available, it's affordable, there are no excuses. The problems you face with an older student who's not prepared for the next step, they're common, they're easy to overcome. You just need to get your act together, get things in order, and resolve to make the next years better than the past years. I hope that's helpful. We're always available here to help. Contact us and let us know what we can do to help you help your teenage student, or to help you if you're a teenage student to get on track and do well as you enter adult life. God bless.